Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal Sentinel.
Alyson Leahy of Wausau is a Democratic candidate in the 85th Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Alyson, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
You say in your campaign Facebook page that you're offering new perspective and new ideas. Give us one or two examples of those, please.
Sure. Well, I think as a younger person running for office, a lot of what you bring is simply a general sense of a new perspective of where you are in life. I'm a working professional, a working person here in the state, so I think a lot of what I want to bring is just kind of a dose of reality to Madison as to what people in Wausau are facing, kind of what the economy or the working situation is for a lot of people. I think it's important, as we see a generational shift in leadership, to really utilize that information. We grew up in a different time. We graduated into a recession, and that's really shaped our economic values and our working lives. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing that I really want to take to Madison, is just kind of that perspective on how working people, working families, younger families are living in the district.
As you're now a member of the Marathon County Board, local governments deal with levy limits, as you're aware. Some local officials say they're feeling strangled by local levy limits. Is it time to keep levy limits in place, dial them back, or get rid of them, please?
Unfortunately, I'm not sure that I can really speak on that topic.
Okay.
It's not something that's come up necessarily during my time on the board yet.
Okay. Transportation funding, there's an impasse over how we pay for our highways and bridges in the future. What are your thoughts on how we should pay for those priorities?
Yes, infrastructure is something that I hear all the time when I'm talking to people within the county and within the larger district. It needs to be a priority. I think that's obvious across the board, and I would be totally game for, you know, the gas tax is something that's talked about a lot. Can we add a few cents here or there to make up for that? I think that's a valid idea. In Marathon County, we had to pass a wheel tax in the last session to get some increased funding to offset excuse me, the lack of funding from the state, and that's definitely something that's still on people's minds. And I think it's unfair to burden the taxpayer to that extent when we could be looking at other avenues that would get us that funding, yet at a more easily attainable rate.
So you'd consider raising the gas tax by a few pennies? The talk in the Capitol that we should begin to look at tolling. Do you have a position on tolling, please?
I mean, they're not fun when you're on vacation. That's definitely something I'd have to do more research into and look into how that would affect local communities and the state as a whole. I know I've heard that tossed about as well. I do feel like that's maybe a bit more drastic a solution, but certainly something I'm willing to look into if it comes to that.
In the context of school shootings and mass shootings, do we need to change our gun laws?
I think there's certainly things we can do to strengthen gun safety laws. The school shootings that we see are just horrendous, and we're really failing a generation of kids, a generation that's grown up expecting this and seeing it as something normal, and it should not be something normal. I do feel like as a society we've become very desensitized, frankly, and I worry about that, and I'm definitely opening to strengthening safety issues as we can.
Any specific changes that you'd push for as a member of the Assembly?
I mean, I think I have to do more research and talk to my constituents. As you know, in central Wisconsin and across the state, you know, hunting is a very big pastime, hunting and fishing and those outdoor activities. So I do think it's important that we're not infringing on the rights of outdoorsmen who are using their guns in the way that they're meant to be used. So it's a tricky topic, but definitely something that we need to address.
I've got 3 questions on healthcare. The first one is, in rural areas, central Wisconsin and north, how do we protect and preserve rural healthcare when you've got older demographics and you've got young people leaving and you've got more and more healthcare being provided by Medicare and Medicaid? Your thoughts, please?
Well, I think it was definitely a mistake to not accept the Medicaid expansion funding from the federal government. You know, that was $2.8 billion they're estimating by 2019 that we just didn't take, and that really could have helped expand Badger care and ensure more individuals here in the state. You know, we're kind of lucky in the Wausau area. There are a good amount of hospitals and healthcare in the area. I think the access is there. It's just making sure that it's affordable. I know something that we are discussing on the county board is rural broadband and how we can get that into rural areas, which could have a great impact on the medical profession as far as in-home care. That's definitely something in rural areas that the older demographics, and as we see people retiring and needing more in-home medical care, that lack of a consistent and reliable internet source is really hampering some of the medical technologies that I think we're going to see moving forward.
Do you think state government has a role in recruiting and retaining doctors, nurses, and other healthcare professionals?
I'm not really sure. I guess to the extent that yes, healthcare, you know, should be a right for everyone, and it is a part of the state role to ensure that people have access. So perhaps recruitment would come into that. Definitely something to ponder more closely.
Then final question on healthcare. Medically underserved Wisconsin residents across the state are eligible to receive dental treatment through a program sponsored by Delta Dental and state government. But these clinics are struggling financially due to the state's low Medicaid reimbursement rate for dental care. Do you think that this program, preventive dental care, should be a priority in the next Medicaid budget?
Again, I would need to look more closely at that legislation, but that sounds like a fine idea. I mean, preventative care in general, both dental and regular health, is key. Definitely preferable to take care of those things before they become emergencies.
The current state budget included a significant boost in aid to our K-12 public schools. Do you think that was enough, or do you think we need another very significant boost in the next state budget?
Definitely another significant boost.
Why?
You know, we've seen historic cuts over the last couple of years to our public education funding. Even with this new funding session, you know, we're only going to be around 2011, 2012 levels of funding for students, for kids, and for public schools in general. So it's not enough. You know, schools are struggling, especially rural schools. They're having trouble retaining teachers, retaining the talent that they need to keep the schools operational. And, you know, we're seeing referendums all across the state on ballots asking taxpayers, are you okay with raising taxes to keep schools funded as they should be? So I think we're seeing a need from the taxpayers, from the voters, a desire to fund things. And again, I don't think that should fall so heavily on the taxpayer.
If it took another $400–500 million in the next budget to better fund our K-12 schools, do you have an idea on where to raise that money?
Not specifically, no. That would be something I'd have to look into more.
The choice program, the voucher program, started in Milwaukee, then expanded to Racine, now it's statewide. Do you think it should expand further, your position on the choice program?
I think taxpayer money should go to public schools. Public schools serve the public. They can't discriminate. They accept all children. It has nothing to do with how much a parent makes, anything of that nature. You know, they serve the public. Their mission is to educate all children with a quality education. So ultimately, public funds should go to public schools.
Would you dial back the choice program or get rid of it altogether?
I think I would have to look into seeing how that dial back would happen, but I don't think it's right that we're giving millions of dollars to public schools that don't have to follow the same criteria as public, that don't have to be as transparent as public schools, and, you know, really the taxpayer doesn't have much of a say in how those private schools are being run like they do the public system.
Okay, a big issue in the next budget is whether we need a new state prison. When you have the prisons in Green Bay and Waupun, built in the 1800s. We're closing the 2 juvenile prisons. Do you think we need a new state prison, Alyson?
I'm not sure about that. I know prison overcrowding is an issue. We're seeing it even in Marathon County, kind of a similar situation as to what you just said. It's an older building, definitely in need of all sorts of repairs that are starting to play into the overcrowding and just safety issues. It's a problem, definitely, and I think we need to address some of those concerns of overcrowding perhaps first and really just see what that means as far as constructing new facilities.
The UW system budget, we've had a freeze on resident undergraduate tuition for 6 years. Do you think that freeze should continue for a 7th and 8th year?
I'd be fine with that. As someone who graduated from UW-Platteville with almost $30,000 in loans, tuition is skyrocketing, and it's really hard for the average kid anymore to go to a public state school. So that's a problem. I think universities in general really need to look at that and examine the tuition and see what we can do to make it more affordable.
The big debate over $4.5 billion in potential tax incentive and tax breaks to Foxconn. Was that a wise decision for the state?
No.
Why?
Very disappointed in this deal. We're sending so much money to one area of the state, and I just don't see how this is going to benefit the rest of the state as a whole. I'm especially concerned about the transportation and infrastructure funding that is going to be used for this one project, and that means that local communities are not going to see that transportation funding that they need, that we've been asking for decades. So ultimately subsidizing all of those jobs, which we don't even know if they're going to be living wage jobs or what living wage even means in this community, it's very disappointing to me.
Now, you said that the Marathon County Board is about to vote on a referendum on medical marijuana. Correct?
Yes, we're about to vote to see if we can get it on the ballot.
Yeah,
yes.
to potentially schedule it in November.
Mm-hmm.
What's your position on both recreational marijuana and medical marijuana, please?
Definitely in favor of decriminalizing. I think
on both?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I think it's something we need to look at in a real way as we're seeing states around us change their laws and adapt to societal change. And we might be missing out on an opportunity to really help people with the medical side and an opportunity to make a lot of tax money on the other side. So, in any case, it is something that it's past time. We need to stop punting around the issue and I think really look at it in a serious way.
Thoughts on potential next steps to fight the methamphetamine, opioid, and heroin epidemic, Alyson? Next steps?
I think what we just talked about is certainly a part of that equation. The medical marijuana side is definitely, I'm hearing from a lot of people in the local community how that's helping them get through treatments without opioids. So I think that could be something huge that we're currently missing out on.
What are your potential constituents in the district telling you that is the #1 issue with them? Is there anything that bubbles to the top as you knock on doors and greet them?
Yeah, there's kind of a few that always kind of come to the top. Infrastructure funding is always at the top of the list. People are concerned about public education, rising healthcare costs. I get a lot of really sad stories as far as that goes. And I think there's also a sense in kind of the central Wisconsin area, some of those smaller communities, even Wausau. We have kids leaving to go to school, leaving to find a job elsewhere, and they're not necessarily coming back. So I think that's kind of something that speaks to me and my generation. What can we do economically, affordable housing, things of that nature that would attract young professionals in a greater way.
Okay. And the final question, you're challenging a Republican incumbent. You want to highlight the differences between you and that incumbent, Mr. Snyder?
Sure. Well, I think he wasn't only a yes vote on Foxconn, he was an author of that bill. And I think that one deal really highlights the differences in a major way. This is such an example, one of the largest examples in our state of corporate welfare that I've ever seen. And that's not me at all. I think that money should be going to the people to better their lives, to better families' lives. I think that was a real mistake, and I think he's ignoring his constituents, especially as I already stated on the infrastructure funding. I think that is going to play out in a major way on people's minds in November.
Okay, thank you. Alyson Leahy of Wausau is a Democratic candidate in the 85th Assembly District. The election is November 6th. Alyson, thank you for talking to WisconsinEye.
Thank you so much.
Campaign 2018 is sponsored by Wisconsin Hospital Association, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Realtors Association, Marshfield Clinic Health System, and Campaign 2018 partner Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel.